Hello, my name is Amato Baba, and today I'm going to talk about our group project. Just a quick overview of what I'll be talking about for the Air 350 term project. I'll be focusing on the SQL database, our implementation for that, and the implementation for the load engineer and the flight manager, and a quick demo of each of those functions. So let's just kind of jump in and talk about our database for a bit. So our database, we use SQLite.net. It's a object-oriented wrapper for SQLite. It allows us to essentially use SQLite in more of an object-oriented way. So kind of trying to treat the database more like an object instead of a actual SQL table. So you don't have to really know SQL code. You can just kind of use this wrapper, and it works very easily to integrate, and it's for most .NET. It's for all like .NET platforms and Jarman, and it's pretty detailed. It has a synchronous API and an asynchronous API. If you want to implement a database asynchronously, for our example, we use the synchronous API. So that's just a quick overview of the type of database we're using. And to actually show that our database structure is split into multiple tables. We have a table for all the airports we have, all the customers, all the employees, the flights, the planes, and the routes. And of course, the transactions. So when customers actually book flights, we keep track of all of that. So that was just a quick overview of the database. And now let's kind of just jump into the application. So this is our home page. And for my example, we're going to be using the employee sign-in, which essentially just allows us to access all the employees. And for the employees, we actually manually created all the user IDs for them. We just thought it'd be simpler since they don't have to go through the whole sign-up process, since it's just an employee account. But the users, they go through the sign-up account and get a special generated user ID. But the passwords are all hashed the same as well. And for the database, I mean, not for the database, for the login, all the passwords are actually hashed. So the password for all the accounts, for all the employee accounts, is just air3550, no caps or anything. You log in, and for this example, I already have some flights created just so we can see kind of everything that's going on. As you see, we have a data grid to show all the flights, their IDs, where airports are coming from, and the date and time. And as you see on the left, we have four options. We can add a flight, edit a flight, remove a flight, or refresh the whole thing. Now, one challenge I wanted to kind of briefly talk about was kind of the role of the load engineer. When it was first mentioned, the problem statement, the load engineer was described as the person who decided which routes to offer flights, and I felt like that can be taken in multiple ways. Our implementation is we have a pre-built graph of all the routes all the routes you can kind of create for flights, and the load engineer's job is to pick a route and decide when the flight is going to leave, when it's going to arrive, and all of that. So before we get into a quick example, I want to actually show you our graph. So as you see, we have our 10 airports here, and each node represents an airport. And each line between the node is a actual route object. So this Seattle to Detroit is going to be a route. And then the distance between them, the straight line distance, is shown as well. So the load engineers get select an airport, and then that's going to shoot all the possible places to get from airport A to airport B. So if they want to go from Detroit, they can only pick, for instance, Seattle, O'Hare, and JFK, but there's more options. But they couldn't be able to, oh, I want to go from Detroit to Miami since there's no path. But so that's just kind of like how the graph is set up. So let's go back to the application. So if we go to add flight, one brief thing I wanted to go over, as you can see the date and time, but one brief thing is the problem statement also said that flights are kind of made 7 days a week. So the way we have it set up is when you add a flight, it actually creates it for that whole week. So ideally, you want to select a Sunday to create your flight. And then the load engineer can be like, all right, pick your departing airport. So let's say we want to fly from the Louis Armstrong New Orleans airport. The arriving airports actually get to be only airports that graph I showed you offers. So, which is a neat thing. So you can't be like, I'll go from Louis Armstrong to Miami. It's just not a possible route. So the load engineer decides, all right, let's go from this airport, and then let's go to George Bush. So it selects to airport, the dates from departing and arriving, and then the time. So let's from all the way from New Orleans to Houston. I believe this is Houston. Isn't that far of a trip. Let's say we depart at 2 o'clock, 2:19. The initial time is actually the system clock, by the way. And then let's say we arrive around, let's say for this example, 4. So when we hit submit and refresh our graph, I can see it adds all those flights in. And it has the correct departing time, it increments a day for a week, and then the correct arriving time increments a day for the week. And the other options the load engine can do is he can select a graph, select a route, and then edit it. And this pulls up kind of the same deal where it's for the editing. I thought it made more sense just to edit one route at a time, one flight at a time, I guess you can say, just in case there had to be a quick change of how you want to depart or anything like that. And it's the same setup. You select your airport that you want to change. Let's just say these two, and then select your times. Let's say it's from 5 to 8, and we'll do that on next Wednesday the 5th instead of flying originally from the 29th, because that's when I selected this from one of our examples. And the 5th. So we hit submit, and then refresh, and you see it's now updated with the correct time. Now let's say we decide we don't want a certain flight this day. We had to make quick changes, and we don't want this flight ID 114. We can just hit remove, and boom, it's gone from the table. So that's a quick overview of the load engineer and all the functions they can do. But what about the flight manager? So if we back out of here and sign into the flight manager, which is this ID, and sign in. As you see, we can see all the flight, and the only ability is to be able to print the flight manifest. So I believe for all of these examples, there is no people assigned, but if a customer was assigned to a flight, they would be able to book the flight, and then when you come back and hit the flight manifest, you will see the customer pop up inside the actual table. So the flight manager, very simple, just selects flight and prints the manifest. And one more thing I wanted to touch on that I didn't mention earlier is where the actual database is stored. So when you boot up the program, the database is actually going to be stored in your My Documents. So if you go up to your documents, you'll see an Air Data. That is our database. And that's pretty much all I want to touch on today. I just want to talk about the main points I worked on for the project. I did other parts as well, but I felt like just to keep our presentation to a more shorter end, just kind of go over some big topics. And yeah, overall, very exciting project. And I'll pass it off to the next group members, and they can talk about other functions of the program. Thank you.
Hello, this is Carlos Gallo. I'm about to demo the customer flow and how they would interact with the system, with our system, Air 355. So this is a new startup project. So basically there's no customers in the database at this time. So we're just gonna start from signing up and then trying to log in. So let's try and do in Carlos Gallo for the name. But as you can see, the password is actually hidden as you type it. But in this case, we're just gonna go with test. I'm gonna put my past apartment number and then city, Toledo. State, you can either pick it from here or you can type it. In this case, I'm just gonna pick it here. Then we get 43614. Here I'm gonna put my birthday, so I can pick it here. I can go back, 1997, January 21st. And here I'm just gonna use my UTED email. And here, just to kind of show error handling, if they try creating an account without actually filling all the inputs, we will get an error message. And here we're going to put a random 16-digit number, phone, again, 7676, it doesn't really matter. We're going to put a random number, and we're going to create an account. Then it outputs the current user ID that's being generated for our account. As you can see, it does not start with 0. It doesn't have zeros at all. The user ID will be 739164, so we take into account that. And right now the system immediately logs me in when you sign up, but just for demo purposes, I'm gonna try and log in. Here we're gonna first try with a random number, user ID, and then a random password. As you can see, you cannot either log in or either user ID or password is incorrect. Now let's try doing it for the account that I just created, which was 739164. And then since we know the password is test, we're gonna do a random password just to check that it's actually validating it. That's good. And now we do test, and we're actually able to log in. And the menu on the back end is not accessible, so that way we maintain the flow of how the user interacts with our forms. Now we get two options. We either have the My Account Info or Book a Flight. For the demo, we're gonna show real quick how My Account Info looks when you just created your account. As you can see on the left, we have all the information inputted from the sign up form, and on the right, we have a data grid which would show the booked flights, but since we're a recent new customer and we haven't even booked a flight yet, there's nothing to display. Obviously the information here is editable, but in this case I'm not going to edit anything, and I'm going to come back to this form after booking the flight. So now let's move to booking a flight. We're going to do, in this case, let's do a one-way trip. We're going to check a flight, for example, from, let's say, Detroit to Chicago. In this case, let's look up a flight. Okay, it seems that there's a flight available. In this case, I'm not really interested in booking it, but I'm going to show it what would happen if I try to submit without actually selecting the row. We get an error saying to just select the row, and now we can select it, and we get our checkout form in this case. So here we have the total amount that we need to pay, the points that we would give him for this if we purchase it with a credit. In this case, since we have no credits and no points, our only option is to pay with our stored credit card. So we're going to do that for now. Yeah, let's do that for now. So now we booked it. Now your flight from DTW to ORD was successfully booked, and now you can check into My Account Info for more information, and it sends us back to our main menu in this case. So we can go back to My Account Info, and now we can see that DTW and ORD is now shown into our data grid in this case, and that the reward points have been added to our account. In this case, we can actually print the boarding pass since it's very recently, since the flight leaves in a couple hours, like in an hour or so. And here we see the information of my name, the customer ID, the customer name, the customer ID, the departing airport with the name and the actual code, and the departing time and the arriving time as well as the arriving airport with its accompanied code. And so now, if I try canceling this flight, for example, then I would get an error message since it's 8:27 and this flight leaves in less than an hour. And sorry, you cannot cancel a flight up to an hour before. So that handles that case. And now let's go back to the booking a flight and try to book a flight with more connections. In this case, let's do something from Detroit to, for example, Nashville. Nashville is the first one here. Let's look up a flight. Oh, seems that there's no flights for today available. So let's try something for tomorrow. And just to kind of show how the calendar kind of pick works, it cannot go back. Obviously, we cannot book a flight from the past, and we cannot book a flight after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So around 7 to 8 months after the current date. So for now, we're just gonna book a flight for tomorrow, and we're gonna try and look up if there's a connection flight between these. In this case, we found a connection flight that gets us two connection flights that take us from DTW all the way to BDA being the Nashville airport, the price of it, and the arriving time and the departure time. So our I guess trip would start at 1:30, almost 1:30 a.m., and we would end up getting to Nashville at 8:30 a.m. on the 29th. So let's say I'm gonna pick this flight, we're gonna submit it, and now since we don't have enough points to purchase it, it's still not available. So let's just pay with credit card in this case. And boom, we get the success message, and now we can go back to My Account Info and see that the flights have been booked in this case. We can go back, and just to show how a canceling flight would work, let's try doing one for tomorrow again for one of the flights that we already saw here on O'Hare, and let's do again for tomorrow. And we have another one leaving at 4:20 tomorrow, 4/29 at 1:30, almost 1:30 a.m. and arriving at 3:30 a.m. So let's pick this flight. We're gonna submit. In this case, since we have enough points, I can actually buy it with points. Boom, and we got our success message, and now we have another flight booked. And in this case, now we can actually cancel the one for 4/29 since we have enough time to cancel that flight. And now there it is, and we get our total rewards pointed back to us. Now we have actually rewards back since we cancel it, and the credits still remains like this. And now that kind of concludes how I would book a flight for our customers, in this case for a one-way trip.
Alright, so I'm going to show you how both the accountant form, and the marketing manager forms or how they work. So first we'll start out by signing into the accountant form, which we already had pre-created, and just like all the other employee accounts, the password is AIR3550. So if we go into the accountant form, it shows the total number of flights and the total income from all the flights combined. And then in this data grid view right here, it shows the flight number and the income from each flight and the capacity that that flight is at. So for income, you can see right now that this is at 8.33% capacity, but there's no income, and that's because the flight was booked with either credits or with points, and so there was no income. The way we find the income is we look for credit card transactions, and we from our transaction table in our database, and we only count those transactions as income. And then if somebody does cancel their flight and receives credits and they use credits later, it counts as zero income, and the income all comes from the first flight that they booked that they received the credits for. So as you can see all that, and then I'll show you the marketing manager. So we go to sign in. His ID starts with a 3 and then 5 zeros, then the same password. And so then we have two different options. We have add plane, which these are all flights that have been created that are not yet visible to customers because they do not have a plane assigned. So we'll assign a plane to 12, and then it auto updates this list after you assign a plane, and we'll assign a plane to flight number 18. And so then we can go back and change plane. So you see the 1 through 6 already, and then we added planes to flights 12 and 18. And so then I can go here and change. So the 1 means that's a 737, and then 2 747, 3 757, and so then I can change this plane right here to a 757, and it auto updates. Or I can change it to a 747, and it'll auto update the grid again. So then if we go back to the accountant, since the flight is now visible to be booked, we see that the total number of flights is increased to 8, and we see that both these flights have zero capacity because no one has booked them. That's all that I have to show for these two forms.